he signed with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at their first inter-Korean summit in April. Looking to win back the public's trust after a number of scandals, South Korea's National Assembly is scrapping a controversial special activity fund for lawmakers. Plus, US stocks and emerging market currencies rebound after China says it will hold trade talks with the United States later in August. Our top story this morning, President MoonJae-in and floor leaders of the five of the country's biggest political parties have come to an agreement on a number of pressing agendas. Standing head and shoulders above all the other issues is the ratification of the joint agreement reached between the two Koreas during their historic summit back in April. Our Shin Se-min starts us off.
President MoonJae-in is putting speed on his so-called joint governance with rival political parties, calling for their full support regarding a number of pending issues. With the extraordinary session starting this Thursday at the National Assembly, the president called on the floor leaders of all five political parties for their support in making progress on issues like inter-Korean relations. For one thing, ratifying the agreement from President Moon's first summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un back in April. And he suggested that the lawmakers join him next month to their third summit.
지난번 4.17 판문점선언에 대해서 국회에서 비준 동의를 해주신다면 평양에서 정상회담을 가질 때 훨씬 더 힘이 되지 않을까 그렇게 생각합니다. 우리 이제 정부의 기본 입장은 그때 국회에서도 함께 방북을 해서 남북 간의 국회회담의 좀 단초도 마련했으면 하는 욕심입니다.
The Panmunjom Declaration the president once ratified had both sides agree to work toward lasting peace and economic cooperation. Another promise made in today's meeting, in line with the president's call for joint governance, the rival parties agreed to form a policy consultation body that would meet every quarter, the first time this November, to improve communications between parliament and the government. Also agreed by the president and the lawmakers was to work on passing pending bills directly related to the people's livelihoods and the country's economic circumstances before the August parliamentary session comes to a close. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, we are going to stay with that meeting at the Blue House. It seems like visible progress was made on Thursday in terms of enhancing some much-needed cooperation between the government and the National Assembly. However, more discussions may be needed in the diplomatic stage of things. Kim Mo-gyun with more.
In a rare occasion, the floor leaders of Korea's five major political parties were all positive about President Moon Jae-in's proposal Thursday to form a joint policy consultation body with the government in the hope of improving communications between parliament and the government. During the luncheon with President Moon, the floor leader of the ruling Democratic Party Hong Young-pyo spoke of a more open negotiating process leading to fruitful outcomes. Liberty Korea floor leader Kim Song-tae also said that he completely agrees with the president's proposal of a consultation body, promising the main opposition parties active participation. But when discussing diplomatic affairs, especially ratifying the Panmunjom Declaration, the opposition representative Kim said that more assurance should be obtained internationally before engaging in any type of cooperation with North Korea. Minor opposition Bareun Media Party floor leader Kim Kwan-young also said more patience is needed for ratification. Considering the president's suggestion of inter-Korean parliamentary talks possibly on the sidelines of next month's summit, there was no direct response from any of the floor leaders. Views were mixed on economic issues like the minimum wage and national pension issues and on President Moon's policy of income-led growth. The opposition parties appeared skeptical. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Now, with the growing criticism over the second salary lawmakers receive every month, the National Assembly has decided to abolish the so-called special activity funds. It will only leave a minimum amount to lawmakers that's solely related to national interest, and lawmakers will have to be transparent about how that money is spent. Our political correspondent Kim Min-ji with the details.
The National Assembly has decided to completely do away with the so-called special activity funds, with the exception of some areas related to core national interests such as foreign affairs, security and trade. That means there will be no opaque funds set aside for the Parliament's negotiating parties and standing committees, no foreign travel expenses for lawmakers, and no expenses that fall outside their original purpose or that go against public sentiment.
For 2018, we will only enforce minimum expenses that are commensurate with the money's purpose and return the remainder. We will also sharply cut the budget for the funds next year.
For this year, the budget set aside for special activity funds in Parliament is roughly $5.5 million. Half of that is earmarked for the second half of the year, which the National Assembly has decided to cut by between 70 and 80%, meaning there will only be around $440,000 used under the name of special activity funds. The latest decision comes amid mounting controversy over the special activity funds, as some ranking lawmakers get tens of thousands of dollars a month on top of their salaries, but have been under no obligation to report how the money is spent. On Monday, the floor leaders of the negotiating bodies agreed to scrap the funds on their part, despite earlier plans to keep them, but only in cases where they can turn receipts or documentation. But the removal of the special activity funds has raised concerns that the National Assembly could just end up expanding its budget for official expenses to make up for the loss. The Parliament said that it's willing to accept any request to disclose how the special funds have been spent after they've taken some time until the end of this year to prepare. The National Assembly also vowed to review thoroughly other areas of the budget allocated to the Parliament aside from the special activity funds, saying that any areas deemed a waste or reckless will be cut. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, more disappointing figures on the jobs front for South Korea. According to Statistics Korea on this Friday, around 27 million people were employed in South Korea last month. That is up a mere 5,000 from the same period last year. It's the first time since January 2010 that the number of newly employed people compared to the same month in the previous year has been that low. In addition, the number of new jobs added has remained in the 100,000 range for 6 consecutive months now in 2018. This is significantly lower than last year's monthly average of additional jobs, which stood at 316,000. The overall jobless rate in South Korea stood at 3.7% in July, up 0.3 percentage point from the previous year. A high-level Chinese delegation will travel to the United States in the coming days for trade talks after being invited by the Trump administration. The crunch visit comes as the two biggest economic superpowers in the world remain locked in an increasingly bitter trade war. MoonJae-in reports.
A statement by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce on Thursday said it will hold a fresh round of trade talks with U.S. officials in Washington before the end of the month. The move offers a glimmer of hope for progress in resolving the massive trade conflict between the two multi-trillion-dollar economies. The ministry says the Chinese delegation, led by Vice Minister of Commerce Wang Shu-wen, will meet the American representatives led by the U.S. Undersecretary of Treasury for International Affairs David Malpass. It's unclear whether the trade talks will take place before or after August 23rd, which is when Washington is due to activate additional tariffs on $16 billion of Chinese goods, an action Beijing has vowed to respond in kind to immediately. The two countries have implemented several rounds of tit-for-tat tariffs on each other's goods since the start of the year and have threatened further tariffs on exports worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The last round of talks took place in early June, when U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross met Chinese Vice Premier Liu He in Beijing. However, the upcoming meeting is lower level compared to the 4 previous rounds of negotiations. The Chinese government did not say what topics would be discussed at the upcoming meeting, but reiterated Beijing's stance that it opposes unilateralism and trade protectionism. The U.S. Treasury Department wasn't available for comment. 이승재, Arirang News.
US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer has expressed hope for a breakthrough in the coming days in efforts to rework NAFTA. Speaking in Washington on Thursday amid the latest round of talks between US and Mexican officials to rejig NAFTA, Lighthizer expressed hope that their neighbors to the south can agree to a new deal. However, Mexico's economy minister has suggested there's still work to be done before an agreement could be reached. The two sides have been meeting without the third member of the pact, Canada, in an effort to tackle their differences, including revamped automotive sector rules and a US proposal to add a sunset clause that could kill NAFTA after 5 years. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he hopes there can be a big step in nuclear negotiations with North Korea before too long. During a cabinet meeting led by President Trump on Thursday, Pompeo emphasized that during the many months of negotiations, there were no nuclear nor any missile tests. The US also got back 55 sets of remains of American soldiers who died during the Korean War, adding that Washington is engaging in dialogue with Pyongyang for a brighter future for North Koreans. He said he hoped for a breakthrough. To that, President Trump said North Korea-US relations seem, quote, very good. Staying with North Korea, and South Korea says it's going to cover the cost of running the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office. Some $3 million will come from the nation's Inter-Korean Cooperation Fund. Renovations have been underway at the Kaesong Industrial Complex since early July, with the aim of opening the office within this month. Once operational, it should enable person-to-person contact between officials from across the border. Now to some heartwarming news for scores of Korean War-separated families who are setting off soon to reunite with their long-lost families in North Korea. But for most elderly people, meeting their relatives one last time is nothing more than a dream, unfortunately. And sadly, for many of those living in a village on the east coast of South Korea, it's a dream that will never, ever come true. Cha Sang-mi is in the city of Sokcho, near the inter-Korean border, to hear their stories.
68 years have passed since the Korean War broke out, tearing people away from their families and leaving them separated in two different countries. Many people from the north fled during the war to a place on the east coast, just over the border, called Cheongho-dong. However, this place is more widely known as Abai Village, which comes from the Hamgyongdo dialect, which means an aged father, referring to the numerous elderly residents who escaped to the area. Abai Village is only around 50 kilometers away from the demilitarized zone. It's also close to Mount Kumgang, where the reunions of separated families will take place next week. According to the people in town, Abai was a sandy beach back in the 1950s, not a place where people lived. But that first winter, they pitched tents for themselves and endured the cold. They say there's a reason why they chose this place in particular.
We stayed here near the border so that we could go back home when the war was over. Most of these people here, though, the first generation of refugees, are dead now. You see the red line?
Hundreds of the displaced settled down in Abai Village, not knowing that the war would end in a truce and separate them from their families forever. Kim says they once had hope, but as they grew older, their memories of their hometown also began to fade. A 93-year-old woman I met near the parking lot says she doesn't want to apply for the reunions. It would just make things complicated.
I fled Xinjiang when I was 22. We left behind a 3-year-old daughter. Do I want to register for a reunion? No, it's meaningless now.
Yi seemed reluctant to even think of the baby girl, whose memory she had buried deep down. The local public hall where the elderly refugees used to gather is now empty. Before long, it seems Abai Village will be no more, its people having lived out their lives in a place they never expected to go. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News, Sokcho.
Now, in much more upbeat news, the two Korean delegations for the 2018 Asian Games in Jakarta have officially made their entrance into the athletes' village in the Indonesian capital. More than 350 South Korean athletes checked into the village in Jakarta, while some 150 are staying at Palembang, which is the co-host city located in the South Sumatra region. On the same day, the North Korean delegation had its welcome ceremony, with some 20 athletes and officials attending the event at the athletes' village. The two Koreas, which will be fielding joint teams in women's basketball, dragon boat racing and rowing, will march together at the opening ceremony. Now, while thousands of BMWs are banned from South Korea's roads over car fire fears here, the safety crisis is not as recognised in the automaker's homeland, Germany. Reports have surfaced in some German economic newspapers and automobile media, such as Handelsblatt, but they haven't gone into any real specific details. Germany's major public broadcasting stations, including ARD and ZDF, have pointed out that 324,000 BMW vehicles have also been recalled over the same engine safety concerns affecting vehicles here in South Korea. The Korean Embassy in Germany and the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency, KOTRA, says no official government move from Berlin has been detected. A group of researchers from a renowned local university say they have evidence to show that Koreans' heads have grown by an average of 6% over the past 40 years. Our Kim Da-mi has more on how and why it seems to have happened.
Thanks to a better quality of life and proper nutrition, Koreans are getting taller and bigger, and so is their head size. Researchers at Korea University College of Medicine ran magnetic resonance imaging scans on 115 Koreans born in the 1930s and 1970s and reconstructed their craniums into three-dimensional images. Korean men born in the 70s have an intracranial volume, the volume inside the skull, that's on average 90 millimeters larger than those born in the 1930s. That's a 9% increase in 4 decades, which is a dramatic growth rate compared to Western countries where similar increases took 1 or 2 centuries.
From the 1970s, Korea experienced rapid economic growth, and its earlier liberation from Japan allowed for socio-economic growth, leading to a noticeable change in head size in such a short period of time.
But the changes in skull size also differed between males and females. Only the height and breadth increased in females, whereas all cranial measurements expanded in males, which proves that physical developments also vary between the sexes. So, do bigger heads mean smarter brains? Experts say that such a hypothesis isn't necessarily supported by the recent findings.
Koreans are considered to have the biggest heads in the world, but that doesn't mean Koreans are the smartest. So far, it's too early to conclude that bigger head size means more intelligence.
He added that Koreans may have already reached full intracranial capacity thanks to proper nutrition and stable economic growth. Whether the head size of future generations of Koreans continues to get bigger depends on socioeconomic growth and lifestyle exchanges. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Now, officials in Italy say as many as 20 people could still be missing in the rubble of a collapsed bridge in Genoa. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So, Adam, what is the latest?
Well, Mark, the collapse of the Morandi Bridge has now left at least 38 people dead, including children. Genoa's chief prosecutor said between 10 to 20 people, as you said, could still be missing. Rescuers continue to comb through tons of debris from Tuesday's collapse in a desperate search to find possible survivors. 15 people have been injured, and rescuers have so far managed to pull out at least 7 people from the rubble alive. The government declared a 12-month state of emergency on Wednesday for the area. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte said he did not want to wait until prosecutors finish investigating the incident to withdraw the concession from Autostrade, the private firm that maintains most of Italy's highways. Much of the blame has been placed on the company for negligence. Autostrade, meanwhile, said it is cooperating with authorities on the investigation and that it is conducting its own internal inquiry. It previously said that Morandi Bridge was consistently monitored beyond legal requirements. Now, Rome has given the firm 15 days to prove it met all its contractual obligations. The Eurosceptic Italian government, meanwhile, also pointed the finger at the European Union, blaming EU budget constraints for hindering Rome's ability to strengthen its infrastructure. The EU hit back at those claims, saying Italy was one of the main beneficiaries of the bloc's 2014 to 2020 budget for infrastructure investment. Turkey's finance minister has ruled out any plans to seek help from the IMF amid the country's currency crisis. Berat Albayrak addressed thousands of global investors in a conference call on Thursday, pledging to protect ailing local banks and cut public spending to prevent the country defaulting on its loans. The minister was trying to rebuff concerns that a damaging trade war with the United States would force him to seek a bailout from the IMF. The lira had gained some strength after the conference call, but it is at risk of another fall over reports that Washington is planning further sanctions against Ankara. Aretha Franklin, known as the Queen of Seoul, has died at the age of 76 in her home in Detroit after suffering from cancer. In a career spanning more than half a century, she had dozens of hit singles, including Respect and I Say a Little Prayer. She also became the first woman to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987. As the daughter of a Baptist preacher, Aretha Franklin was inspired by the gospel music she sang in church. She performed at many prestigious events, including the presidential inaugurations of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Clinton said America had lost one of its greatest treasures, while Obama paid tribute by saying her voice offered a glimpse of the divine.
Good morning. We can feel that the blazing heat is slowly going away. What a great change in just one day. Bearable temperatures are in the forecast with a gentle breeze today. In fact, heat wave alerts have been downgraded or lifted, and Seoul is finally under just a heat wave advisory after nearly a month of heat wave warnings. So daily highs in Seoul will still be warm at 34 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Gyeongju will have a lot more bearable temperatures today. The warmth will keep on rolling into autumn, so we'll have to wait for a while to see temperatures in the 20s. But in the meantime, let's enjoy the beautiful skies. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. So much more bearable conditions are in the forecast in South Korea, while the north will be under mostly sunny skies as well. Residents of Japan are being put on alert for Tropical Storm Salik, which could become a powerful typhoon and threaten the country next week. Wellington will have stormy weather on Friday, and rain is expected to linger until Saturday. The largest fire in California's history continues to grow on Thursday, while smoke is reaching Washington and Baltimore. As for South America, Rio de Janeiro will have a rainy end of the work week. In Europe, Madrid will see highs in the 30s, but lows will continue to be in mid-teens. Lastly, to Africa, Cape Town will have some sunshine on Friday. And that's the weather update for now.
Well, that's where we're going to leave it for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. Do stay tuned to Arirang TV. We've got plenty more coming up, including our next newscast at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.